Okay, yesterday we ended up uh, looking at the add event listener, and we finished with the issue of the arrow keys not being recognized. So we used the same event listener that we'd used in our calculator, document.add event listener key press, and then we have our function, storing the event as name, and then if I use alert name and I refresh this and I run it, if I hit, like, say, the 5 key, okay, no problem, 5, G key or F key, no problem. But then as soon as I hit the arrows, nothing's happening. So I gave you the assignment of doing a quick Google search to see what you could come up with, and most of you got it right. There's just one simple change, and we need to switch this to key down instead of key press. For some reason, arrow keys are not recognized with key press, only key down. So if I refresh this and now bring it back up and I hit an arrow key, there we go. So that was the up arrow. So if up arrow is arrow up, then it makes sense that down is going to be arrow down, and it is. So arrow up and arrow down are what we're going to use in our if statements. I'm going to get rid of my alert. So if I want to make my player paddle move up and down, then when the up arrow is pressed, I want to decrease the Y value. Because remember, Y is 0 up at the top. Right now I'm sitting at around 300 or something. So I want to decrease that number if I'm going up, increase it if I want to go down. So let's do an if statement here, get rid of my alert. If name equals, double equals arrow, arrow up, then I want to make the player paddle go up. So I need to go down and look at my player paddle. So my player paddle has an X and a Y. It is going to be the Y that I'm changing because I don't want to move it back and forth. I want to go up and down. And I want to move up and down by this amount. So I currently have this set at 10. I think in class I had it set at 2. And then when I was playing around, discovered that 2 was way too small of a movement. So I changed it to 10. So what I want to do then is if I'm going up, I want to subtract, oops, get the right one, subtract 10 from 270. So if I hit the up arrow once, it should go to 260, then 250, then 240, etc. So I'm going to do player dot y minus equals player.dy. Okay, so I'm just taking that starting position of 270, subtracting the dy, which is 10, and that should move up. So let's just go ahead and test this one before we do the down. So refresh, up arrow, there we go. Each time I hit up, it goes up. If I refresh it and I hold the arrow down, there we go, it goes up. And you see there's a little bit of a lag. We're going to talk about that here in a minute. But let's go do the down now. So down is going to be the same thing, except I need it to move down. So if name equals, and I should probably go ahead and do an else if because it's only going to be one or the other. Else if name equals arrow down. Let's go ahead and copy this line because it's going to be the same thing, except now I'm going to increase by 10, so plus. And refresh. Down, up, and there we go. So now it works. But we have a little bit of an issue here. I mean, it works, but it's kind of, I don't know, it's jumpy. If I hit and hold the arrow key, kind of hard for you to see what's happening in the video, but when you test this, you'll see this. It moves, and then there's a bit of a delay before it actually realizes that it's still being held down. So your first assignment today is going to be to think about how you could modify this code so that instead of that delay, that immediately just starts moving in that direction, up or down, and continues moving that until we want it to stop. And what is that? How do we know that we want it to stop? So think through that. Think about how you can do that. And I will give you a hint that we can also, not only do we have arrow up and arrow down that we can listen to, it is also possible to do key up events, not just key down events. So that might be a way that you could incorporate some kind of code that's going to listen for key down and key up. That's up to you, but think about how you can make this movement a little bit smoother instead of the really jagged or delayed reaction, because obviously it's going to be okay, but it'd be more playable, a little bit better if we had smoother movement. All right, so then the next issue is going to be when the ball gets over here. Let's say I'm in the right place, see if I can actually get in the right place. There we go. The ball still goes right through the paddle. So the second part of your assignment today is then going to be to start thinking about and see if you can come up with some code that will determine when the ball is intersecting with the paddle, and then what do we need to do with that? Well, obviously it needs to bounce off the paddle just like it's currently bouncing off the wall. So how can I, with code, determine that the ball is in the same position as the paddle to have it reverse direction? And for that, think about the coordinates of the paddle. So those are your two assignments for today. Think about how we can make the paddle movement smoother, and how can we get the program, the paddle, to recognize that it's being intersected with so that the ball will bounce off. And if you get through those quickly and you want to move on, our next task will be then starting to add some very simple AI, artificial intelligence, for the player or the computer paddle, so the computer can play against us. So you can start thinking about that if you finish those two.